Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to be talking about the November 30th, 2020 Lunar Eclipse in Gemini, Part 2 of 2. Now, it's important to look at, when you're talking about the lunar eclipse, whether it's a lunar eclipse or regular full moon. It's important to look at the aspects it makes to the points in your chart, as of course this could impact the delineation and interpretation. Now, this transit's going to make a conjunction to my natal moon in Gemini in the first house. So, that could manifest in a multitude of ways. It might be a time, where I might simply become very exasperated, tired, full, maybe a mercurial home situation where I'm very peripatetic, bouncing from one place to another, and being in the first house, it might even be taking a toll physically, maybe to some degree. And it's also could be a time where maybe I've had enough, basically, of just maybe superficial new beginnings, ones that might start and maybe don't quite finish or meet their fruition or what have you. Remember, the first house is about new beginnings. Gemini, of course, could be very superficial energy. And the thing, too, is the fact it's in the first house of the physical body. I have to be careful, and especially it's hitting my natal moon in Gemini. That's not going to be something nerve related or something with the hands, the arms, lungs. That might be a revelation of sorts. At this time, being the first house of the physical body. But anyway, another thing too is that looking at this as far as Sabian symbols go, it's going to be at 8 degrees Gemini, this transit. So based on the Sabian symbols, interpretation, could be very fortuitous for flourishing in manifold vocations. And given that it's a lunar eclipse, this could be a very important period for many where they may be more very cognizant of Gemini-like qualities, whether they are a Gemini sun, moon, or ascendant, or simply people that might embody these characteristics. It could be really a revelation of sorts for people to be having more versatility, being more multifaceted than they ordinarily are. Now, that would be true for a lunar eclipse in Gemini, regardless of degree, but this is something where it may really reinforce it and emphasize this very strongly, and it could be a life-altering type of move where one might quit some kind of could be a Gemini type position and do something where they could, or it might be something else Gemini related that they may embark on at this time. And it could be a situation where many people may have been stagnant for a certain amount of time somewhere, and this is the time where they may be able to branch out a little bit more. Now, the 8 degrees of Gemini, as far as Sabian symbols go, could also be very auspicious for prosperity and affluence. So this could be a time too where if one is at a point where they're become aware of what they can, of other vocations they can actually do, whatever they choose might be more promising in terms for generating income at this time, and this could be very fortuitous. So this is just how this may manifest and pan out. Now, it's also important to look at the electional aspects it makes, as this, of course, could impact the delineation and interpretation. It's going to make an inconjunct to Venus in Scorpio. So, inconjuncts in astrology can be really can be about adjustments. And the fact you're talking about the Moon in Gemini and Venus in Scorpio, it's a very strong contrast of energy. The adjustment may be between perhaps very superficial, which is Gemini, close to home people, which is the Moon, and also deep, very provocative, which is Scorpio type relationships. This is something where one may make, or many may make, some kind of decision in terms of maybe having something a little bit deeper at this time. If there's too many connections that have been superficial, it might be a time where people may go for more deeper connections, deeper relationships, and or in some cases it may actually go the other way, where maybe if there was somebody or people that are too close for comfort, so to speak, maybe something happens where they wind up going to people where they're not maybe quite as clingy or overly, dominant, or what have you, jealous, something where they're not as controlling, perhaps. So it could manifest. It could either, I see it's either going one way or another. But when you're talking about inconjuncts, it can often reflect too much of one or too much of another. Now, also too at this time, and the fact that it is on a lunar eclipse could be very intensified, and it might be something where the decisions that are made regarding what I just talked about can affect the person for a very sustained and protracted period. Now, also too, other electional transits can be intensified because they're taking place at the same time as the lunar eclipse. Now you're going to have an opposition between Venus in Scorpio and Uranus in Taurus. So keep in mind, Uranus is about freedom and independence. So one way this could manifest, this could be about having the freedom going away. You're going Uranus being away, opposite end of Venus, going away from very deep, provocative, even controlling connections. This is this eclipse is something where or how it might take on it is that you could see a lot more connections, relationships ending at this time in contrast to other eclipses. Yes, all lunar eclipses can signify very significant endings, but because not only is there a lunar eclipse, you're also having those aspects what I was talking about, like with Venus, Scorpio, with the inconjunct to the moon in Gemini, and you're also going to have Uranus opposing Venus in Scorpio. It tells me this could be a time for a lot of change in terms of connections at this time, more so than the average lunar eclipse. And also, too, when you look at other transits in the natal chart, other transits to at this time to your natal chart can be intensified and amplified as well, because they are taking place at the same time as the lunar eclipse. Now we're going to have for me, I'm going to have transit Mercury in Scorpio make a conjunction to my natal Neptune in Scorpio at this time. And again, this is something that can manifest in manifold ways. See, recently I had my credit card number has gotten stolen. I think it's interesting how this might be tied into it, because having transit Mercury in Scorpio conjoin my natal Neptune in Scorpio could manifest in communications, which is Mercury, over credit cards, which I would say would be associated with Scorpio, because Scorpio is associated with the 8th house in astrology, and maybe perhaps credit card fraud, which is Neptune. So, and I think maybe I'm going to really get some information on this that might maybe somehow maybe the person that did this would be divulged. I'm not sure how that's going to work exactly, but it can be a very important period for me. So another thing too, I thought, and the thing about this too, on as far as the lunar eclipse, this lunar eclipse goes too, is that it's going to the transit moon in Gemini is going to conjoin the United States natal Uranus at this time, which could be very significant, because as many of you may know, in the United States we have a very prodigious coronavirus crisis, to say the absolute least, of course. And the transit moon in Gemini, you're talking about, lunar eclipses can be about very powerful revelations and unveilings. And it's going to conjunct, in fact, it's going to conjunct Uranus and Gemini. Keep in mind, Uranus can be connected with computers and the internet, and Gemini is associated with the early education. But that tells me there's going to be a very maybe important time where maybe something is revealed regarding at-home learning, and of course with the internet and computers. Maybe they're going to enforce more schools to have people at home during the for the internet. Maybe it might last for a very good part of the remainder of the school year for many people in the United States. Hold on a moment. And it falls in the sixth house of the United States daily routine, interestingly enough. This is also something too at this time as far as transits to United States chart goes. Transit Sun at the time in Sagittarius will conjoin the United States first house cusp in Sagittarius. Now, the chart I'm using is the Sagittarius rising United States chart. So for me, I mean, that might manifest. I'm looking at this, maybe that manifests at this time, having the transit Sun hitting the United States of Sagittarius ascendant, could be about shining the light really on the face of America at this time. Maybe on some negative qualities, maybe the recklessness, the self-righteousness, not wanting to be ordered or driven. And the thing about it is, and that's really, you know, for Sagittarius energy. And what could be significant about this, maybe this is a little bit about becoming more conscious in the United States of America, what the negatives of the United States in terms of what's happening with the coronavirus, how those characteristics are tied in to the proliferation of the coronavirus pandemic. Maybe this is a turning point for that in the United States, and maybe people become really aware more of what's actually going on, and that the recklessness, the foolhardiness is strongly attributed to what is actually going on at this time. And keep in mind that the transit of the moon in Gemini, lunar eclipse in Gemini, will be opposing the United States ascendant as well. So a lot of people in the United States, the freedom-loving Sagittarius energy may be in opposition to this, but it may be something that may have to be done at or around this time. Now, another thing I would say too, I mean, when you're talking about lunar eclipses in astrology, I mean, eclipses in general, I would say could be about something that may have seemed seemingly insurmountable or unattainable may actually be accomplished. Let's say, for example, that somebody has this transit hitting their 8th house, the lunar eclipse in Gemini in their 8th house in their natal chart. Well, one way that could manifest is that maybe something could happen, and this is a really, you know, it's an odd example, but it could still apply. Say something happens, and you have to take somebody, you know, to a hospital, and you don't have really much driving experience. Keep in mind, Gemini can be connected with cars and short journeys, local transportation. 8th house is the house of crisis in astrology. You take the vehicle, and somebody's got to go to the hospital. Again, you don't have an abundance of driving experience. You take, and then to top it off, say your steering wheel is not on the vehicle. The steering wheel is busted. Something happens, you find this wheel, you find whether a pair of pliers or vice grips, you connect it to the wheel where the steering wheel was, and you're able to miraculously drive the vehicle despite the lack of experience, despite having to improvise in an emergency situation, and you find a way to get to the hospital and get this person taken care of. And something happens where maybe, you know, somebody finds out about this story, and it might lead to something very positive in your life at maybe based on this. You get some position in some emergency situation, some position, something that requires quick wittedness, quick thinking, and you just never, and in the eighth house of transformation, the transforming period in one's life. So that is something one way that could manifest and pan out. So, and on a minor note, I thought was interesting. I saw something. I think it's something that takes place in southern Maryland for like the time period of like November 22nd, 2020 to November to the end period, November 30th, 2020. November 30th, of course, is the lunar eclipse in Gemini. And it was something about a Charles County speed camera program. I guess it has something to do with the enforcement of speeding with vehicles. And interesting that that period ends on the 30th of November. And lunar eclipses and full moons can be about endings and culminations. And you're talking about cars that are associated with Gemini as well, and speed. Charles County speed camera program. I mean, Gemini is pretty quick. Last time I checked, that's interesting how some of these things often, correlate with astrology, and people aren't even really aware or cognizant of it in many instances. But anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay up.